Infor Factory Track for LN, Extensibility Example 1. Extensibility can be used in a number of ways in Infor Factory Track. In this example, we're going to be looking at how we can add existing information which LN is already sending back to Factory Track, but which is not currently being displayed on the screen. Later examples will cover the extraction of additional information from LN to be displayed on an Infor Factory Track screen. In this example, we are going to add the EAN code to display on the item inquiry form. So we have the standard layout and we have the required layout where the EAN code has been added. In order to do this, we need to follow a number of steps. First of all, we need to set up the user correctly. Then we need to define exactly what needs to be added to the form. We need to identify which query to LN is being called, identify which form we need to extend, add the field to the form, link the field to the LN data, save the form and unload the metadata, and then test it. So going through these steps in sequence, the first one is the setting up your user correctly. I've logged into Factory Track and I go to Administration, Users. Select my user. In this case, I'm using SA, but we wouldn't normally recommend that. And check that the editing permissions are set to Site Developer. Super user is easier, but if you wish to, you can have individual permission groups. And then check when it comes to user modules that the Factory Track Dev module has been given. Finally, we need to go to the View User Preferences and check that the Unload IDO Metadata with Forms field is selected, at least for the duration of this exercise. Next, I need to define what needs to be added. This requires some knowledge of LN. In this case, I'm going to be adding the EAN code, which I know is the TCIBD 001 CEAN field. Next, I need to identify the LN query being called. In order to do this, we go to the Site Parameters form and make sure that the Record Queries in Tran History is turned on. We can then very easily perform the item inquiry. And then go and look in the current transaction workbench to see the query that was called. So if I look here and grow this, I can see that in this case I have called query number 288. I also need to check that one of the outputs in here is indeed the EAN code, and here it is. I can see TCIBD 001 CEAN is 930060152599. So the query is providing me with the information, so I don't need to make any changes to the query. I just need to add that field onto the form. The next step I need is to identify the form that is actually being extended. In order to do this, I first of all go to Transaction Set Maintenance, find the transaction I'm intending to change, and if I scroll along here, I'll see the actual LNWM item inquiry, which is the transaction name. I then go to Development, Transaction Setup, and do a search on LN item inquiry. So this tells me the form that is being run. So lnwm item inquiry.mobi is the form that I'm using. So this is the form that we are going to have to extend. The next action I need to do is to actually add the field to the form. So from Factory Track, I click on the Open Designer icon. This opens the Designer version in a new window, and I'm going to make changes at Site Default, which is where we recommend you make the changes. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to design the item inquiry. And I see lnwm item inquiry.mobi. That's the form I'm going to change. So first of all, I'm just going to drag down these fields here. Just move that up. So then I'm going to click on static, and I'm going to draw a static field here. And the first thing I'm going to do is to give it a name. So I'll call it EAN static. I don't need a description, and we'll give it a caption. I'm just going to give it a caption of EAN. If we wanted to make this translatable, we'd have to have a string, but in this case, I'm just going to do this. I then click on Appearance, and I give it a theme class of WM static. We do this to make sure that it will adopt any standard warehouse mobility logic throughout the system. So I save that. So now the form looks like this. Now we need to add the actual data field to the form. In this case, we're adding an attribute of the item number to the form. The field is populated as soon as the item number is validated. The actual fill is performed via a validator, which is held at the item level. This validator instructs what LN query to call and what to do with the results. We need to tie the EAN code from the query to the new field that we are adding. In order to find the validator, we first need to check which validator is being used. So we open the data source and we check to see which validator is being used. In this case, we see it's empty. So we go to Inheritance, and Inheritance shows us the validator that is being used. It has a component class of ln item cc. We click on the ellipses next to the ln item cc, and we can see the validator which is triggered by it. So if we go down to validators, data source, validation, we can see the validator which is called ln item val. So ln item val is the validator we need to be concerned with. In order to open this, we go to Edit, Validators, and type in ln item val, and we select it. We then click on the Parameters button, and this shows us the validators that are used here, and we can see this. And if we click here, we actually see all the fields that are linked and where they're linked and everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new variable here, which we're going to call VEAN, and this is, we're going to link it to the TCIBD CEAN code, and we click OK, and we click OK, we click OK, and we click OK. There is a bug sometimes in Mongoose where we will lose this filter, so we need to check that after we've done this whether the filter is not there. If it has vanished, then we need to add it again. So I had previously copied it into a notepad and saved it, and now hopefully it will be there. Okay, so that looks all right. So what that has done now is that has tied the LN field to our validator. So the final step we need to do now is to create the edit box where we're actually going to display this. So we select Edit and draw an edit box. And on the left-hand side, we're going to give it a name, which in this case we're going to call EAN Edit. We're going to give it a theme class. Again, this is so that it picks up all the standard logic that we use throughout warehouse mobility for whether it's in bold or whether it's irregular, what the font to use and everything else. So we advise you to use these same theme classes. We click on the behavior and we check read only disabled to be true, because this is just a display field. Click on data source and we select the binding type to be a variable, and here when we specify what the variable is, we will just link it to EAN, which is where we set up the link. So finally we save this. So now we've made the changes to the form. So we have linked the field to the LN data. So finally we need to save and unload the metadata. Once we've done that, then we can do the test. So I'm going to close this form and I go back here, and what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go to definition, unload all global forms objects. If I was in multi-tenant cloud, I would need to run a form called unload farm IDO metadata. I would unload the farm IDO metadata and then unload farm pod metadata. I don't need to do this in this case because I'm working in an on-premise environment. So finally now, if I go back to my main menu and do my item inquiry, as you can see, the EAN code is available there, and now it should display it in this way. So this completes this extension.